Four Nations face-off 2, electric boogaloo, and it was a disaster for the United States men's national team, with the World Cup kickoff just 444 days away and counting. USA 1, Jesse Marsh's Canada 2. An experience as if the hockey was played on grass, with no hitting, no Kachuk brothers, and only 10 fans and a dog. We're in a giant near-empty stadium to watch it all go down. Really a humiliating, humbling experience for all who care about the US team. Canada beat us on home turf back-to-back for the first time in the history of that matchup, going all the way back to 1925. Podcasts weren't even invented. That after the self-immolation against Panama, 2 days after Mauricio Pochettino himself had talked about the US becoming a number one team inside 5 to 10 years. And suddenly, we look at our golden generation and ache, asking ourselves, where is the nadir? Because there's no sugarcoating this. Like thousands of you, I live and die for the United States national teams. And this past week has been an agony, rife with frustration, disappointment, and a gnawing fear of all that is to come. Last night, we expected a response, and this wasn't it. And this was not it. And we now have to calmly break it all down and work it out. What's happened to Poch's lemons? That's what we're asking ourselves. Or how close should our hands be to the panic button? To answer that, in our darkest hour, it's a ray of sunlight on a stormy day. Oh, it's a joy to say hello to my friend from ESPN's Football Americas and Vamos on your Men in Blazers Media Network. Oh my God, it is good to see you. Like when your ship has gone down and you're in the ocean and you need a life preserver. It's Mr. Hercules Gomez.
A beam of light in this very dark moment that we're experiencing. It's good to see you, Raj. It really is.
Herc, I'm going to be honest. We are taping so much later than we imagined. I missed a flight to Atlanta. We're actually taping late Monday night instead of earlier in the day. I'd like to say I'm glad because it's given us a chance to marinate, to gain perspective, to gain a sense of calm, I hope. We'll find out. First up, to be clear, the Nations League, I want to be clear, it's not a big deal in and of itself. When we first won it years ago, decades ago, 3 years ago, we did a show when we put the tournament in perspective. We said it was nice to win, but it didn't signify a whole hell of a lot. And I'm reminding myself of that now because we've lost one, finally, first time in our nation's history. And I want to stay consistent. But we don't have that much competitive football, Herc, before the World Cup kicks off. So these games mattered. I'd love to hear where we are mentally for you on a panic scale between 1, I'm starting to get nostalgic for those bounce passes, all the way to 10. If we emerge from the group stage intact at the World Cup, this will all be forgotten. Where are you? 1, huge panic. 10, chill.
I'm about a 6.5 going on 7 because I'm so glad you spoke about the bounce pass. I see a lot of this chatter about, well, we were happy and we didn't even know it. Oh, look, we used to win this tournament. You can be okay with moving on from Greg Berhalter. That's a good decision. And you could absolutely hold to the fire and hold accountable a man that is making $6 million a year to take this program to the next level. And those players who are, as of late, underachieving in that, regressing in that. We can absolutely differentiate the two. That's where I'm at today. I'm a little bit more in awe, if you will, not panicked. I'm in awe of how this team looks worse. And then I get reminded of, well, the U.S. doesn't have the luxury, the U.S. men's national team at least, of having a pool of players, regardless if you think it's the most talented on paper that's ever existed, of having prime players not be available and just saying, we're going to mop the floor with Concacaf. Forget the rest of the world. Concacaf. You're missing important pieces. Anthony Robinson, Serginho Dest, the next 3 nines you could deploy as the number one, Ricardo Pepi, Folarin Balogun, Haji Wright, depth pieces in Malik Tillman, maybe some questionable choices by Pochettino in who he calls up and who he deploys and how he deploys them, but he doesn't have the best pieces available. So take that into tact. But then it's those who are available. Like, that's really what doesn't make me panic, because I repeat, I think they will be okay going forward. At least I hope they'll be okay. I think they've shown us they have the ability, Raj. But it's the pieces at hand that didn't perform. Because people will point out to the 7 Major League Soccer players that were on this roster. It wasn't the 7 Major League Soccer players that were committing the mistakes. It wasn't a Major League Soccer goalkeeper that was on his near post when he should have been not so on his near post. It wasn't a Major League Soccer defender or midfielder or winger that didn't collapse on Carrasquilla when he was giving the ball to Waterman. It wasn't an MLS winger that was backtracked into his box and allowed Ahmed, the Canadian, to slip that ball across squarely to Jonathan David. And it wasn't MLS defenders who were allowed to be turned by the Premier Nine in this confederation that is Jonathan David. These are seasoned European players. That, to me, is the unacceptable part. There are players who are begging for an opportunity. There are players who are aching for a chance that didn't take advantage of it. And we will talk about that.
Let's get into it. By the way, did we have enough good players? Did we not? I met an agent right after the US had lost to Panama who just convulsively said, this Panama team is on about 5% of the wages that the US team had just beat. So there's quality and there's quality. But before we go any further, I've got to say, this Men in Blazers Vamos collaboration is brought to you by our good friends at Prize Picks. Oh, go and download the Prize Picks app today. Play $5, get $50 instantly when you use code MIB. But it does feel like we're in a weird moment, Herc. And we're in a moment where every single, it feels like, former player is now a pundit with a podcast. And retired players for the first time in the United States soccer history are going all in, two-footed on this team. Landon Donovan tweeted, and I'll quote, "I'm so sick of hearing how talented this group of players is and all the amazing clubs they play for. If you're going to show up and actually give a crap about playing for your national team, decline the invite. Talent is great. Pride is better." And we will get to all of that in a moment. But first, I want to relive some of the beats of the game last night and then dive into some of the challenges which are propelling this sense of free fall with the World Cup coming fast into our face. We charged into the Canada game. We told ourselves the sucker punch loss to Panama was, quote, a warning shot. And you know, the thing with warning shots is, ultimately, I say this to my kids, how you respond to times of challenge is what defines you. Mauricio Pochettino said as much before the game. Unleashed 5 changes, said, "We need to show character." That's a quote. We now watch every game through the Clint Dempsey doctrine about this current squad. He said it only has 2 problems, and I paraphrase, who's going to score the goals and who's going to save them. We have questions at both ends. That was going into this game, and it was feisty at the outset. Alistair Johnson went airborne to take out Adjimon very early, NHL style. Honestly, I mean, that was a moment when I thought that Poch should have subbed in a Kachuk brother. Alphonso Davis limped off after 11 minutes, which took the steam out of Canada for a hot moment. We saw some scrappy, nervous fare. You texted me. You were like, this looks like a January camp with reinforcements. There was so much slop from the US. Tyler Adams, I mean, if you watched him, he cut such a frustrated figure in that first half. There was just chaos behind him in the back line. We were unable to hold on to the ball, just kept coming down, back, right down our throats, down both flanks. The ball fed to Minnesota unit Taniu Laswei. He stabbed home with 2 US players marking, well, pretty well no one in the box. 2 Canadian players left utterly open in front of goal, 6 yards out. Herc, how did this happen? I mean, really, was that goal from a US perspective a coaching problem? Or was that purely players making terrible decisions in massive moments?
Ultimately, the players have to execute. And I think what irks fans the most, and yes, former players turned pundits, is before the willingness to bleed, to sweat, to fight was always there. Maybe you didn't have the technical, maybe you didn't have the opportunities or the platform that this generation has. But that pride to play for your country was always there. That was first and foremost the most important thing. Can you be there for your country? Do you want to be there for your country? And it was always a resounding yes. Hell yeah. This generation, soft-spoken, doesn't want the pressure, doesn't look like it's ready for the moment. Oftentimes in this tournament, these two games look disinterested. I was asked, Raj, who didn't show up? And I just said, well, just ask me who did. That's a shorter list. Ask me who cared. That's a shorter list. I could come up with maybe 2, 3, 4 names, maybe. And it's not your Weston McKennies. It's not your Josh Sargents or even your Christian Pulisics, your names that you thought this camp should be the guys who make a difference. It's not those guys who showed up. That is what I think gets fans and alumni riled up, is you don't see the willingness to suffer and bleed for your team.
We'll dig a little bit deeper into that in one moment, because I do think it's fascinating. The debate whether they care or not, I think they deeply care. I mean, football has changed so deeply. The calendar has changed. The demands on them has changed. I mean, let's dive in and analyse in that one moment. But undoubtedly, it felt so bloody dark in that moment. But I always believe trouble is opportunity. And pretty well, on their very first comprehensive attack, Tim Weah collapsed the defence, kicked out to Diego Luna. Cap tied on this day, sweet Diego Luna. I love that little maverick man. Loves to wield the dagger in close quarters, outside of the boot dish to Adjumon. That dish was delicious. My God, and the big man from Charlotte slapped home, it has to be said, through the goalkeeper. A goal so very badly needed. Felt Pepe-esque in terms of saving the programme for one moment. Real Salt Lake to Charlotte. As you say, MLS going to save us all. Adjumon, 4th player to score in 3 of his first 4 US men's national team appearances. Eddie Johnson, Bill Luby, the iconic Burt Paternard. Finish, not the greatest, but they all count. Where's he on the depth chart rankings after Josh Sargent blew a raspberry Thursday night? No goals in. Is it 16 appearances for him, going all the way back to 2019? Do we reconfigure the Herc striker depth chart?
Absolutely. And I think in the eyes of many, you'll find have found no bigger Josh Sargent cheerleader, if you will, or believer than the man you are talking to today. But there is a reality, is for as talented as Josh Sargent is, and he is talented at the club level, he can score goals, all types of goals, for whatever reason. At the international level, it's always something, Raj. It's his fitness, it's injuries, it's absences, it's opportunities missed, but he's going on 5 years without a goal, Raj. There is no forward on this earth that can starve that much and still receive opportunities in the international game. Patrick Adjumon has a skill set where today he may have just leapfrogged Brandon Vasquez and Josh Sargent and maybe the 4th depth piece in that, well, now striker profile for Mauricio Pochettino. It's one thing to say he's lacking here, he's lacking there, but all we've seen are goals. And you can say, well, at this level, well, that's the only level that we've put him in front of to have the opportunity to score on, and he scored. So there's something to be said about that when others don't. So it's a situation right now for your striker. You save yourself by not being in this camp. It's Ricardo Pepi, Folarin Balogun, and Haji Wright who come out looking fresh, who come out looking great by not being here.
Is it a depth chart that his absence makes the heart grow fonder? Is that where we are tactically right now?
You know that saying that the best ability is availability? Not this camp. If you were here, you got lumped in with everything else.
Jesus Ferreira's looking better and better. Is that what you're telling me? God bless America. By the way, talking about God bless America, can we talk about Diego Luna for one moment? I love this man. I mean, I think we both hinted upon this. He was probably the one man on both of our lips for the gent who came out this window of a real upside. I'm not comparing them as players, but Luna, he always has a bit of that Dempsey IDGAF swagger that we've been missing. Plays with an urgency and a directness, no respect for his elders. It's almost that DNA that the team's been missing.
I love it. And listen, I had a moment where I criticized Diego Luna heavily for denying a call-up. He was called in as an alternate on the Olympic squad, and he didn't want to go. And I thought that was short-sighted on his part. Josh Atencio, who ended up being also an alternate, ends up going. I was like, that could have been Diego Luna. And for a while, I thought that was a knock on Diego Luna. And I get to see Diego Luna and how he's carried himself since. Head down and work. I get to speak with Diego Luna, who we interviewed on Vamos, and got to see how great of a kid he is. And got this really, thank you, and got to really be, in the mind of Diego Luna, and you want to cheer for the kid. And when Pochettino says, well, I was going to throw Giovanni Reyna in, but I was going to wait for extra time against Panama, and he lumps Diego Luna in at the same time, Diego and Gio Reyna, I thought to myself, oh no. Because the next game, if Giovanni Reyna doesn't play, all the pressure's on Diego Luna. It's going to be, you play Diego Luna instead of Giovanni Reyna? How's this going to play out? And you saw in the game, the one player who on both sides of the ball wanted the ball. Offensively wanted the ball, wanted to make something happen. Defensively wanted to hunt that ball down, did everything in his power to try to get that ball back. It was Diego Luna. Diego Luna didn't look like a Major League Soccer player. He looked like a player playing with urgency. He looked like a player trying to make a statement. And that is what you want when you play for the national team. The hunger, the willingness, and the wanting to be there, because you know that you are taking somebody's spot. You're taking somebody's dream. That's Diego Luna's dream that he grabbed a hold of.
It was. I mean, that was like, even amongst the darkness, there were always rays of light, and Diego Luna to more. Because we didn't know it at the time, but this was the United States high water mark. That moment, we all wanted an improvement tactically, mentally, energy-wise, but that was it, honestly. And here's what worried me watching this, Herc. International football, it's a lot more kind of basic than the club football that we live week to week. It's really a football that's about combinations. You want players that gel together, who link up well. And Canada, it's got to be said, threatened to Alistair Johnson, who I adore. He's the kind of player, I bet you, Jesse Marsh looks at him as like, Alistair Johnson is like the bastard offspring of me, Jesse Marsh, hand grenade energy. That's what I've been preaching for this Canada team. He and Buchanan found each other on repeat. And watching them, I was like, we United States players have so few teammates looking for each other. Western struggled in these games. 24 out of 35 passes completed in 69 minutes. Nice. I mean, I guess here's my question in a concrete fashion, because this is what I don't understand about this game. Tim Weah got on the ball once and was unstoppable in that moment. He collapsed that defence with his direct running, his hunger, his desire. How did that not happen again? How was he never fed to cause chaos again? How does that happen?
A lot of that is the player himself. A lot of that is positioning. He was playing on the left, and he's such a direct player. Inviting him in to cut into his right foot into traffic to limit that play will stifle him. Even though he did combine with Diego Luna on that play on the Ajiman goal, it's not your typical way of outing. And that was disappointing for me. And I go back to the Panama game. If there's one player that should have been chomping at the bit to prove himself in the Panama game, it's Timothy Weah for what happened at Copa America versus Panama. That was the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of Greg Berhalter. Was that game? And the singular moment in that game where it all went south was the red card to Timothy Weah. So if you're Timothy Weah, you should be dying to prove yourself. And he didn't get that chance, or maybe didn't take care of that chance or advantage of that chance against Panama. And against Canada, what kills me the most is you got beat in the most U.S. men's national team of old type of way. Canada today has the mentality and the intensity of the U.S. men's national team of old. And that, to me, should be killing this U.S. men's national team. That they beat you in the way that the old U.S. men's national team would beat players. And you said players finding each other. I had a conversation with Anthony Robinson about defending each other. When I interviewed him on Football Americas, he wasn't at the Canada game where they lost to Canada in the friendly. But after, He said, that can't happen. We have to protect each other. They went after Christian Pulisic. They made a statement. Jesse Marsch had an idea of how he wanted to hurt physically the U.S. men's national team. The U.S., they just rolled over. And they did it again. They did it again. And that to me is inexcusable. You're supposed to be a family. If you don't like each other, at least act like you like each other. Be there for your brother.
God, there's many different kinds of families. Herc, we're going to watch the Royal Tenenbaums together one day. But second half, one change at half time. Marlon Fossey on for Joe Scally. Give us a little bit more hair volume. There was warning shot after warning shot, to be candid. 2 penalties not given to Canada. By the way, quite rightly in both cases. I want to applaud the referee, Katia Garcia from Mexico. Had a really good game, I thought. Difficult circumstances. Jesse Marsch had the red miss, got the red card. Went on I think it was a half marathon into the bowels of the stadium, where he then lurked in the stands, felt like a racing Bobby Valentine. But Canada kept coming. US had a couple of chances to clear the ball, but Jonathan David took the slip pass, cut inside. Mark McKenzie duped. Oh, and the finish was murderous. And I know you love Jonathan David. Genuinely, I think there may be a familial connection that we will uncover the way you love that man. But my God, that finish hurt double. Mostly because it was one that the United States could not muster at all. The whole week of football, just a level of composure. It didn't feel forced. It looks like he expects to score the moment he takes possession of the football. We look so desperate in comparison. We snatch at everything. But that was just an exquisite moment of elite footballing composure.
Yeah, it's a moment in time where Jonathan David recognizes exactly who he has and how he has him. That's an elite 9 right there. That's bad defending. Yes, it is, but he leads him into that. Mark McKenzie thinks Jonathan David, because of his playmaking ability, the ability he has to slip in the ball, is going to slip in that ball to the runner. And he goes to close down the lane of the runner instead of being goal side where the danger is, which is the ball. Jonathan David recognizes that, and with one clear chop and fluid motion, puts it on his left foot, his weaker, I'm doing air quotes right now, weaker foot, and puts it past a diving Matt Turner that can do nothing about it. It's a typical Jonathan David type of goal. And Jonathan David, the all-time leading goal scorer in Canadian men's national team history. Jonathan David, the all-time leading goal scorer for Lille in their history. Jonathan David, the all-time leading goal scorer in European competition for Lille. He is him today. He's going to go on a free transfer to a massive club, and he deserves it. He is that player.
It was so unshocking to him that he scored. Didn't even bother to run behind the goal and hug Thierry Henry. That is how confident he is in his scoring ability. And again, we wanted to see how the United States would respond. And here we have to talk about Christian Pulisic, who all game was frustrated, ineffective, unable to create. I think 1 shot in 2 games, singled out before this one. Poch actually said he expected more, quote, from his captain, who he then gave the armband to, which was, that fascinating discordance. I need more. Here's the armband. We know he's played out on the flank for Milan and thrived. Pochettino prefers him central, played his most dominating attacking force in a number 10 role, proceeded to fail to influence either game. Christian Pulisic is a fantastic footballer for his club team. He cuts just a different figure in a US jersey right now. How do you understand it?
Listen, he's a talented player. And take this for what it is, but he reminds me so much of Landon Donovan. His demeanor, and which is why Landon's comment is, while he's right, it's just so interesting from who it comes from. It doesn't seem like Christian wants, I don't want to say the pressure, but he doesn't want that spotlight. He just wants to be him. He just wants to go out there and play. But he doesn't have that luxury. Christian Pulisic is the face of U.S. soccer. He has to perform. He has to represent. And I enjoy him in a playmaking role. I really do. Under Paulo Fonseca at AC Milan, he thrived in that role. At times for Sergio Conceição, he's played in that role. He's done well in that role. You can do that role for the U.S. men's national team, but you have to have an identity about how you use Christian Pulisic. Oftentimes against Panama in a deep block, he could never find space in between lines, in between defenders to operate. He could never find forward movement from Josh Sargent, who doesn't have that pace to play that way, or from his wingers who were never in positions to be dangerous. It didn't look like this set of players had ever played with each other. And in the second game, I understand, because now you're playing with a Diego Luna who you've never played with. Now you're playing with Timothy Weah, who's on the left. Now you're playing with a Patrick Agiman, who's a different skill set. You're playing with different center backs, which I think is very important, because you can't presume to try to play out of the back with Mark McKenzie and Cameron Carter-Vickers. Excuse me. That's not going to happen. You're not going to put these players in positions like a Joe Scally and say, okay, guys, play out of the back for me. Find Christian Pulisic in between these lines. Thread that ball. Give him something in movement where he could turn or already be facing. So it's a difficult situation against a team that's up-tempo, against a team that's intense, against a team that's going to high-press you and are very athletic. So I thought a lot of it was Christian Pulisic not being able to recognize and find the moments. And more than anything, I thought it was the coaching staff putting him in a position to succeed, because I don't care what anybody says. Christian Pulisic's the best player in Concacaf today. That's who he is today. And if you put him in dangerous positions, he will feast, but give him an opportunity to feast. Christian Pulisic needs to do his own to help him feast. As Thierry Henry famously once said, free yourself. Give him the opportunity to free himself. They never put him in those positions. So a lot of this is on Christian, yes. A lot of that is on how they used him and what transpired.
69th minute, triple change. Pulisic, Tyler Adams, McKennie off, Tanner Tessman, Yunus Musa, Gio Reyna on. Mauricio Pochettino had honestly embarrassed Gio on Friday. He said Gio Reyna isn't fit to play in the way we expect for the US. I think 546 minutes in 21 games this season. Club future, cloudy. We did not create a lot, bar one Diego Luna close range chance. I think Corky St. Clair smothered it. One of two shots on target the US had all game. The other one was a goal. We'd really created so little for a second straight match. Credit Jesse Marsh's Canada. They were hungrier, more cohesive, more clinical. They beat us twice on the run for the first time since 1985. Jesse, trust me, was relishing this game. He's on a redemption tour with his Canadian Charger. This is revenge for him. It's really a game he dreamt of. I think he would have preferred if it was in the final, but he'll bite your arm off for the third, fourth place playoff win. I'm happy for him. Happy for his squad, who are starting to believe. I do believe CONCACAF is all the better for this increased level of competition. Congratulations also to Mexico, who won their first Nations League title. Raul Jimenez scoring all the goals on the way to glory. But her big picture, as we pivot into talk about the United States, can you re-summon how you felt at the final whistle as a former player? Because I was like, this cannot be who we are now, that we're so numbed after the last Copa. The disappointment post-game is normalised and no cause for additional alarm.
It's not who the U.S. is, Raj. And I think I'm very calm in that manner. Listen, I look at some of those players who finished the game against Canada, who were looking for a goal. If you would have told me after the third Nations League final that they'd be in this situation in a game against Canada looking for a goal, and on the field would have been Arvsson, Marlon Fossey, Brian White, would have been Cameron Carter-Vickers, would have been, the likes of Mark McKenzie, some of these players on the, you were like, what, Tanner Tessman, what's going on here? No, something happened. There's got to be context to this. And I think there is context to this. I mentioned the important pieces missing. I mentioned the questionable tactics, lineups, and selection, which I think merits being questioned. You don't pay somebody $6 million a year and just say, do what you want. No, you hold them accountable, hold them to the fire. I think that is valid. Giovanni Reyna, you said Pochettino embarrassed him, humiliated him. I agree. Either you're not watching the players or you're not doing your homework, and your homework is going back and looking at the previous Nations Leagues, looking at the previous semifinals and finals of this team against the same opponents, Raj, the very same opponents. And after watching those videos, you come away with the conclusion that Giovanni Reyna isn't fit enough to play the way you want to play, which is what? Slow and boring? Because that's what we saw? It doesn't make sense to me in what world you could see the tape of the previous editions and come away with Giovanni Reyna can't get on the field versus Panama until extra time. Giovanni Reyna can only get a 30-minute cameo in 2 games. That's one on Gio Reyna. The second, Raj, is Gio Reyna has a little reflecting to do. He really does. Because if I'm Gio Reyna, if I am that talented, and I really believe he's that talented and that high of a ceiling, it can't be that the slew of coaches I just had, like a lot of coaches I just had at Dortmund, are all idiots. Because each and every one of them have overlooked me, have decided not to play me. I know it was injury at first, but now that I'm healthy, all these coaches said I couldn't get on the field, and when I did, I couldn't stay on the field. And now Mauricio Pochettino is going about things the same way. Nuno Espiritu Santo, he's an idiot, right? I mean, well, of course, look at Forest. Look how bad they're doing right now. It can't be everybody's fault now. Like, you really have to look from within, because I believe Giovanni Reyna, out of any player I've ever seen in the U.S. men's national team, has the highest ceiling. But that doesn't mean anything, Raj.
So, some caveats. We missed Anthony Robertson. We missed Pepe Balogun. We missed Serginho Dest. But every international team's going to have injuries, the nature of the beast. So let's dive in. As we're trying to work out whose fault is this? Whose fault was this? What were we watching? Let's start with the coaching. Because for me, this was Poch's welcome to CONCACAF moment. You know, in the Jurgen Klinsmann era, we had a couple of truly confounding, bewildering moments where Jurgen, when he talked honestly, he was like, CONCACAF is just different than what I was used to before I came here. I need to learn these rules. Some people would say Jurgen never properly learned the rules of CONCACAF. Poch is grappling with CONCACAF right now. So how much of this is on Poch? He's an accomplished, he's a world-renowned club coach. He's adjusting to both the American reality, which is different, the CONCACAF reality, the US soccer reality. And he's trying to inculcate his vision of, he talks about it, Argentinian grinta, fight into an American international team. You can train for like 2 or 3 or 4 sessions at a time. So there's change within change for him. Can he coach at the international level? Different. The American level? Different. CONCACAF? Different. So how much of this is on him?
I think there's a good chunk on him. I think the players have a massive, massive take in this, but Pochettino, you select the players. You select the tactics. You select the adjustments. If I'm a fan, I'm asking myself, okay, when do I get to see what $6 million gave me, Raj? When do I get to see what a $6 million man can do with these players? Because that's what he was brought here to do. Show us the next level. I don't want to see him in YouTube charity games with I Show Speed, with these guys up there. I don't want to see him. You go. I don't want to see him in Rosario with News Old Boys visiting his friends. I want to see him visiting Giovanni Reyna. I want to see him visiting Haji Wright. How are you doing, Haji? Can you be available, Haji, for the Final Four so my team doesn't come in 4th place out of 4? I want to see that from Mauricio Pochettino. I want to see him take this seriously. And I don't want to confuse what I'm going to say. I'm not saying that's the case, but that's what it looks like. When at halftime, the game broadcast interviews him, the sideline reporter, and he says he is happy with the first half against Panama, I don't want to hear that. When after getting 4th place in a 4-team competition against opposition you should beat in a tournament that you've never lost, I don't want to hear him say, we don't need to be so pessimistic. Don't worry, fans. We'll be fine in 2026. And I don't want to hear him before a tournament say, we don't want to just beat Panama. We want to destroy them. And I certainly don't want to hear him say, in 5 to 10 years, we are going to win the World Cup. Based off of what? This program has gone from workmanlike to rebirth to arrogance. And we need to come back down to earth. nothing is given. You don't have the luxury, Raj, of missing these important players and not having the coach at an optimum level when it comes to accessing the talent that he has. You don't have that luxury of getting away with that. Not here.
2 quick notes on Poch. By the way, I need to say this because I think it's lost in this. He's often forgotten. Spurs probably is his talisman club experience. He had a slow start there, Herc. And there was talk of him being, it's forgotten, on thin ice until around the end of November when I think it was a Harry Kane deflected goal against Aston Villa. He said that goal, he believes, saved his job. And Chelsea also a slow burn. Here's what I'm going to say. It takes him a moment. It takes him a moment at club level. There he has the chance to train with his team all the bloody time. That's my worry. And I do wonder how he moves next because he's been very generous. He's been very kind. We've seen he can be very ruthless then with his squads. We saw that again at Tottenham. We gave Adebayor and Yunus Kabul a chance, a long chance into October. Then he'd seen enough. He just culled them all. Went young, hungry. In came Harry Kane. By the way, Harry Kane then was thought to be Millwall and Norwich level, second tier, loan out Harry Kane. No, he brought him in, said, you're going to score my goals. Eric Dyer, Ryan Mason, all stepped up. And I do wonder if there'll be an echo of that around the Gold Cup. A certain ruthlessness, here we go. But the fans are seething about the players, Herc. There's a consensus that's been reinforced from the comments from the former players. Players who thrived in times when the US men, honestly, the US men, when I watch them on game tape now in the 90s, early 2000s, they're like a good Everton under David Moyes' team, in which the collective is always greater than the individual. We're about fight and spirit and proving ourselves to the world. This now is almost a complete set of individual players at the club level by a country mile. I really believe that. But there's a collective. They're now open to being accused as not caring, not fighting hard, not working hard, not hustling, lacking that spirit. I listened to one of the pundits this morning, Herc, and he debated for much of the show whether the players care or don't care. That can't be it. That cannot be it, that they care about playing for the US or they don't care, Herc.
I don't believe that either, Raj. Obviously, these players care. I just don't think their mentality is the same. I had Greg Berhalter on my set in Football Americas, and I called him soft. His team soft. I know you heard my comments. That's the same group of players. Individually, the U.S. program has never had players like this. Never had players thriving in Milan. Never had players, doing well at Juventus. Never had players at the highest of levels doing what they do. They've never had that. But collectively, this program has never done what the 2002 have done. Has never done what 2009 Bob Bradley, 2010 winning a group in a World Cup, 2014 making it out of a group, 2013 winning in the Azteca. They've not had those moments. They've not done anything no previous generation has done.
So let's delve into this. I just read a really interesting piece by my friend Rory Smith. He wrote it about the Norwegian team, about Erling Haaland, Martin Ødegaard, Oscar Bob, Alexander Sørloth, Borussia Dortmund's Julian Ryerson. Incredible footballers individually, but they have underachieved. They play terribly together. Often they fail to qualify for very much at all. This Norwegian team, they used to be good in the 90s, and they, listen to this part because you'll relate, they played a physical collective football and they've lost that physical edge. One of their federation members, Rory, interviewed them and said that the aspect of football they used to excel at was blunted because, quote, everyone can now run a lot and jump a lot. And they asked them, what are they missing? And they said in Norwegian, the word lidels. And they asked, Rory said, what is that? And the person said, suffering. South American teams know how to suffer. They have a willing, quote, to sacrifice, an ability to enjoy being pushed a little to the wall at times. When I read all of this, it's a bit of a leading question. I related deeply. There's all kinds of parallels. I mean, our older American players, listeners, they used to fight like hell because they needed to, Herc. They were fighting for their own self-respect. Landon playing for San Jose and Los Angeles Galaxy and able to catch on in the Bundesliga. This current set of young American players, you've said that they don't have to fight for their self-respect because they have it. They've established themselves in Europe. They're making tons of cash. They don't need to fight like hell because their club careers don't depend on it like the 1940.
Yeah, they don't need to fight like hell anymore. And that's what I think is the crazy part, because these players had to fight like hell when they were younger in cutthroat situations to prove that they belonged. And they did. The mental fortitude that it takes for a adolescent to go by himself and swim in those deep waters as Weston McKennie did, as Giovanni Reyna, as Christian Pulisic, as Chris Richards, and the list goes on and on.
Taking high school lessons in German that he didn't even speak. My God, it's crazy.
It's not easy. And that suffering has made everything so much sweeter. And he's achieved glorious things at the club level. And this is where I don't want it to get mixed up, because I relate him so much to Landon Donovan. Landon didn't show his emotions like Christian doesn't show his emotions. It doesn't mean he didn't care. It doesn't mean he doesn't care right now that they were out of their 4th place out of 4 in the Concacaf Nations League. He's just not Tyler Adams. He's not going to hold you to the fire in front of everybody. I wish you could clone 11 more Tyler Adams so you have 1 more on the bench. I really do. I really do. But that's not the case. That is not the case. And you need to find a way to have these players compete like they've done for one game against quality opposition, and that was against England, where these players, a lot of them who played in the Premier League, were disrespected by that country and that program, and they felt like we have to prove something. They have to play every single game like that, where they have to prove something.
So there's something else that's changed. Because they have succeeded individually with their clubs in Europe, now when they come back, Herc, there's a complete lack of noise or pressure when they play for the US compared to their club teams. You know, Juventus, Milan, you play a bad game there, either of those clubs, and you are crucified by the media. You are crucified by the fans. You know, you lose last night for the United States, almost no noise at all. No one even notices. We're all too busy talking about Connecticut and Florida in the college basketball. And there's something else that we don't talk about, another reality that's almost an outgrowth from the helter-skelter football calendar, which is new and has changed since the 90s and the 2000s early period. Football now never stops. These elite players, their schedule is unrelenting. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just trying to understand the differences in the reality that explain what we saw last night. These players are playing so many more games at such a high level. Their bodies are shattered at this point. They also don't want to get injured. They don't want to shatter themselves more. There is a dip in intensity. The club career is the money maker. You know, Tyler beat his heart out for the US twice over the past 2 years. And then, you know, his club career was done in for an extended period. Rationally, I don't love this and I prefer how it was, but rationally, international football is secondary for them.
For a lot of players, yeah, it really is. But a lot of those players have done something at the international level, and that's a reality. I understand the whiplash of the Nations League. I really do. I really do. And for these players facing Panama, facing Canada, facing Mexico for the 20th time in the last, 3 years, that's got to feel tiring. It's got to feel boring. It's got to feel tedious to be in that schedule. I understand. And yeah, it's probably more important to them to concentrate on what's going on in their club situation and not concentrate on a 3rd place game. Alphonso Davies got injured in a 3rd place game. He's willing to put his body on the line while he's still in the Champions League, trying to lift another Champions League title, by the way. Because that's the mentality they have now in Canada. That's been instilled to them. That as a country, they still have not had that respect, and they won't get that respect unless they constantly beat teams like the US.
And then there's one other thing that's changed. This one's a subtle one, but I'm just trying to throw these out here so we understand how we got to where we are right now. But anyway, one thing that pissed me off mostly was about, the loss pissed me off, but how few people cared about this loss. You know, fan-wise, is pretty devastating, if I'm being honest. This game was buried away. It was streaming. March Madness was on. The annoying thing is we have so few opportunities to win over a wider audience. This game, no one would have found this game by accident, flicked through it on the old channels. This team, these players, this coach, they weren't excoriated on SportsCenter post-game or on the back pages. You didn't hear Morning Drive fan radio go off. I mean, there were no fans in the stadium outside of a tiny soccer bubble, which is getting smaller and smaller. We'll talk about that in a moment. Right now, it feels like we're really in a dead wind. And this is an interesting point to me. The counter to that is that for the first time in the United States, Herc, we've got a punditocracy. We've got a media class of ex-United States players who are willing to go in on the players in public. They've got podcasts now. Example of in England right now of every old Manchester United player taking a massive dump on the current squad week on week. Many of the old US players currently have very little connection to this new crop of current players. Plus, it's a foreign manager that they don't have to protect. Both are new realities. And I think on CBS, this is actually interesting. I could talk about this for hours, but I keep it quick. Having Thierry Henry on the show was chef's kiss. Someone who doesn't have a relationship, doesn't even have a relationship with US soccer. So he was willing to talk honestly. God bless. Willing to talk honestly and freely about what he saw as a footballer. That set a different broadcast tone than we're used to. So the American pundits, Clint met him there, brought a candor that we've not always had. Herc, there's a sharpened critique within we're living in a little football bubble. We really are. That was my first point. But within that little football bubble, currently, it's knives out.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's knives out. That's the thing, Raj. Like for the longest time in this country, which is a footballing country, and I'll get into that in a second, if you had any opposition to the current norm, if you had an analysis that was anywhere near negative to somebody, it was toxic. It's not about being toxic. It's about wanting to be better. And I think we've all been respectful in how we frame and how we express our views of this team and the program and the federation. But it's because you want to see the best for this program, this team, this federation. Now, Raj, I'd push back on the notion about the U.S. not being a soccer country. The U.S. is a massive soccer country. It's just not a U.S. men's national team country. It's just not a. It's just not a fan. That's not a
normal football nation, Herc.
Of the men's team.
That's not a normal football nation. A normal football nation, they care who the US manager is. They know exactly that England does not have a left-sided solution. They know, they know the weakness of their squad. They're obsessing about the metatarsal of the striker. That's a normal football nation.
Yeah,
You've just described a passionate football nation, but not a normal one.
Think about this for a second. How is it that in the United States, Mexico, if the game was at noon or if it was at 4 o'clock, would sell out SoFi Stadium, would sell out Mercedes-Benz, would sell out MetLife? Those are not 80,000 Mexican nationals who are coming over for that game. They live in this country. Colombia, Argentina, Copa America final. Those are not planes coming in for this game in this country. Those are American citizens who love the game, who haven't had the U.S. men's national team reach them, identify with them in the way that those countries have. And that is a difference because we look at this team. How identifiable is this team with you, the American Raj? Do you identify with anybody on that team? Does anybody on that team inspire you to want to shell out your hard-earned cash? That is where we are at with this program. And maybe it's not these players today who are at fault. Maybe it's past mistakes by past players, a past regime. But today, they are not a likable team. And that is a reality. They have a unique opportunity, Raj. They have 6 windows. And one of those windows is the Gold Cup. To change the perception for fans going in to what is a pivotal moment in this country, the 2026 World Cup. If 1994 spawned the birth of a domestic league and gave us everything we have today, 2026, by the way, 1994, still the most successful World Cup in the history of FIFA. 2026 has to blow that out of the water from a business front, from a sporting front, from an inspirational front for fans.
I have no doubt it will do, by the way. Americans love a circus. I think it'll break late right now because, my God, we're not doing a lot to help it ignite. You asked me what's likable. I think so many of the players are remarkable and inspirational. I wish we were ratcheting up the noise around these players. Chris Richards is an incredible human being from Alabama. Tyler Adams I find humanly, profoundly inspiring. Tim Weah is an incredible, emotionally thoughtful human being. Yunus Musa is an incredibly humble human being. Diego Luna, I think, is the depths of Diego. You could write a novel about Diego. I mean, so many of these footballers have lived remarkable journeys. The likable, non-likable thing I see as noise, non-noise. Like, we need to create a spotlight around these human beings and articulate their stories, their journeys, their struggles, their wonder. I mean, it's something I think about more and more and more about the role that, honestly, I should be playing in this. I can play. Like, why am I not doing more? But let's pull this together. 444 days remain for Poch to figure all of these problems out and fix it. Please God, he's a very smart man. I do know that. So let's say he will fix these things. Let's think positively. Herc, where does he start? What changes do you expect? What can he do differently now?
Well, I think perception is reality. And you give these players the perception that they have to fight, they have to claw, they have to bleed for the jersey every single time, regardless of the outcome, regardless of the play, regardless of tactics. That is what fans want. The rest is going to figure itself out because I do think there is ample material at hand. You get back an Anthony Robinson, you get back a Serginho Dest, you get back your prime pieces, and you figure out who the 9 is. You get back Matt Turner's confidence, and if not, go on to the next. But you figure that out. You've got a lot of depth. You've got a lot of pieces to really do something. You get that going first if you're Mauricio Pochettino, and that means identifying what you have and who you can count on.
God bless. By the way, you name more players that I find likable / inspirational. Ricardo Pepi, Anthony Robinson, incredible human beings all. For me, I think Poch has got some difficult decisions ahead. This team needs leadership, real leadership. I mean, the dropping of Tim Ream in this game removes, I think, roughly 60% of the leadership on the field. I'd make Tyler Adams my captain, my tone setter. I think Poch has got a difficult decision at goalkeeper to make. I have a feeling he's going to drop a very big name from the Gold Cup squad to make a statement that nothing is a given. Nothing is just, I mean, everything has to be earned, as you hint. I also think there's a battle for optics right now. You hinted it about 10 minutes ago. Mauricio is based in Europe. That's not a problem for me. It's where most of our footballers play their trade. But if I were US Soccer, I would have him speak more. He's so interesting to listen to. When he's given free rein, I would have him be seen more. You've said it. Be seen with the players after games in Europe. Show that the bonds are being deepened, that the work is there, visible to the fans. I'd have him speak over here a lot more. I'd articulate the pathway through Poch, his philosophy. He has one. It's deeply intelligent. Just needs to be more audible, more visible. We need a plan to hear more from the players too. You've just hinted upon that. I think these players are, I want to be clear, this likable, non-likable debate pisses me off. They are immense human beings. You already hit it, Herc. They've sacrificed so much. They have suffered so much. They've given so much. This means something to them. It really does to play for the United States. I can't stand that debate. They are great human beings. Tyler, Chris, Tim Ream, Diego Luna, fascinating. Let's step up. But I do think the Poch optics and reality are going to define this next phase. I mean, Herc, there's one quick detour. I spent some time in the Canadian camp before these games. Spent some time with Panamanian fans on Thursday at SoFi. I'd just say that the conversation, football is a refraction at the international level of geopolitics. So the Canada talk, the annexing of Canada, the disparaging talk about the Panama Canal. Let's just say the geopolitics of this world. They are front and centre in football more than we can imagine. And I do realise, I watched this Nations League, got a hint of how 2026, let's just pray we're not in Greenland's group in the opening round is all I'll say. teams, particularly European teams, are going to tear into us. Every single team is going to want to smash us. And I did watch this, this tiny tournament, this insignificant tournament, and realised we were darlings in the world's eyes in 2014. Things are changing in how the world sees us and what they want to do competitively when they face us, which is something we can meet that challenge, but it's something for us to get our head around. And here's something that upsets me most in the here and now, Herc. You said it earlier, we have so few competitive games to get ready for all of this. And I think for me, Herc, this is what kills me about the last week. This last week played in a near empty stadium at the very time we needed to make noise, to begin to excite a nation, to introduce them to our players, to have them start to become known names and, please God, one day heroes. All we really created was just a low-grade moan, deflating anonymity. I said this in the newsletter this morning. The McNeese State team manager, what's his name, Amir Khan, is currently better known than any single male American player right now. And I hate to say that, but it is true.
In his own country, probably. Christian Pulisic is the only player that I could think can even compete there. It's the only player that would be recognizable. But yeah, when I say likable, think about this, Raj. Think about how disappointed fans have been with this program, that this generation lost 13 months with an interim coach until Greg Berhalter got there, and how he got there. And then once he was there, Greg Berhalter had what happened in 2022 happen in front of the world with the Reinas. And they decided to bring him back. So it feels like more time was wasted. And then you could have just walked away, and you didn't. And now we are here with Mauricio Pochettino. It just feels like there is so much wasted time that has gone by in a very short cycle. Absolutely, Raj. So here we are, 14 and a half months away from a World Cup, and it still feels like we're not where we thought the U.S. men's national team should be at. Fans are frustrated, and I understand the frustration. That comes into the likability.
To close her, this is where we are. This is, let's be honest, the widest sporting audience that we dream of becoming football fans does not know anything about this team. This soccer bubble, we are diehards. And I've got to say, many of, even the diehards are feeling a frustration and anger. They're losing hope. Our mailbag just overfloweth in the wake of this game. We got so many letters. I'm trying to dig out and respond to them all. But the key word we had over and over again was the word apathy. And we saw that, the empty stadium. And we always have a reason. We always have a reason. We'll always explain it away. There's the traffic, the 4 p.m. kickoff time, Los Angeles, March Madness, White Lotus. Why would they play a game on the White Lotus night? I've got to say, ultimately, yes, we can make excuses, but two things can be true. And I really, our mailbag is evidence of even a hardcore fan base, which is struggling to believe in a program. By the way, if you want evidence, look at the comments on USMNT only. Those are the diehard fans. They are angry. They are frustrated. They are miserable. We had this overflowing mailbag this week from dedicated fans, many of whom travel to the games or travelled to the games and are flailing. Here's one. I picked one at random. We got so many. I didn't have time to read them all. Letter that struck me from a gentleman, Jason Babin, who wrote, so many things to discuss. The US has no identity. It appears players don't care. You could accuse the coaching staff of not caring. It feels big picture. The powers that be don't care. Players in previous generations were not as talented, but at least they gave everything. They scrapped for victory. They play like they had a point to prove. This generation acts like they don't have anything to prove because of their club success. And Pochettino is in danger of looking as if he's collecting a paycheck. He doesn't appear to be scouting or reaching out to the clubs or trying to win over dual nationals. It probably leads the players not to really care. If all of these entities don't care, why should I any longer? No longer hopeful. Yours, Jason Babin. I mean, Herc, I don't know what to say. I'm going to let you respond to Jason. I mean, that kind of in 3 paragraphs, Jason's kind of summed up our whole podcast.
He really has. And I'm hoping that's not the case for many fans. And I've always been told about you're never as good, you're never as bad. And this is a bad moment right now for the U.S. men's national team. You weren't the best team when you were beating everybody in the Nations League and Concacaf Nations League. You're now not the worst team because you lost it. I think there is a lot of context. And also you have to look at this zone. I know people don't want to see it, but this zone is so irregular. Mexico is going through one of its darkest times. They finally won. Canada can now beat Mexico, can now beat the U.S. They lost to Mexico. Panama has beaten the U.S. in the last 3 goes in major tournaments. But Mexico can't beat the U.S. in a major tournament. So it's all these crazy factors that is our zone, is so irregular, that I think should give a lot of hope to a lot of fans in this zone. And if you're from the U.S. men's national, you just have to stay the course, because ultimately the major trial, the major tall tale sign will be the 2026 World Cup. What you strive for will be that.
God bless. And by the way, I do think that you can make the case, Pochettino, and he kind of hinted at this, like, let's get our problems out now. This is, Houston, we have a problem if we're doing this in the World Cup. Trouble with that is you do not know until you get to the World Cup. I'll just say this has been a long 7 years. I mean, it really has been. And this has been a savage window for everybody who cares about this team. Especially, by the way, when it's set against the anniversary of the Snow Classico, which you played in, which you survived, which was such an iconic moment when everything, I watched that game, I was there, I typed away with my laptop in a garbage bag to protect it from the blizzard. I know I was there that night. Everything felt possible. It felt like this program. We'd lost in Honduras. It felt like we were at darkness on the edge of town. That night, it felt magical. At the end of that night, it felt everything was possible. We then went into the Azteca. Brad Guzan had the game of his life. We fought. We won. It was collective football. And that looked like it was going to be a real catalyst for the game to surge in this nation. Retrospectively, that era looks like a high watermark. The tide feels like it's receding, which is depressing as heck. So let me ask you, you played in that game. You were forged in that era. So what makes you most optimistic now, Herc? Make the case for an upside, a redemption cycle.
The talent. You look at these players individually, you don't get to Europe by chance. We could question their mentality today, but there's mentality there. We spoke about these players fighting in their teenage years. You don't get to win a Champions League if you're just some scrub. There is some serious talent here. Individual talent. I have belief they can pull it together collectively. By what I've seen from these young men, I know that from afar it can look like an unlikable bunch at times. But we've had a lot of these characters on our network here, Men in Blazers, in different shows. And when you get to experience who they are, when you get to chat with them, they show you their character and you're like, okay, we have solid people here, solid human beings, and you want to cheer for that. But we know, because we get to see it, they need to show the world that along with that talent they have, they can be a good team. And along with being a good team, they can be likable characters.
Oh, Herc, amen. I'd say to better days ahead. It's been a long 24 hours. It's a late night now. We were going to take this early morning. I just want to thank you, you beautiful human being, for staying up late and processing it with all of us. Thank you, beautiful.
I got to give myself an ultra. It's late.
We both deserve one. More than I could say. To you listening, I just say Premier League cannot return fast enough into our loving arms. So many of these players are returning to their clubs. Please God, they will find the richest veins of forms of their career. And just think about how insane it is. Anyone would have said that 10 years ago. The US used to be their safe haven, the place where they felt at home. US jersey used to feel like Superman's capes for so many of these players. God bless you. Right now, yes, they feel a little like chainmail, or at least Castore jersey levels, but I believe in these human beings at the individual level. May they find their collective fight in the weeks and months to come. Big love to all of you. Go USA. This is Rog saying courage.